Hey YouTube, for Valentine's Day this year I binge-watched Kindred the Embraced, a gothic drama series from 1996. Kindred the Embraced is based on the Vampire the Masquerade role-playing game, which I dove into before in my video covering the Vampire the Masquerade comic series. I'm a big fan of the World of Darkness franchise, and when I found out about the TV show, I knew I needed to check it out. I'd heard about this show before, but I finally decided to sit down and watch it for Valentine's Day. It felt appropriate since the franchise itself isn't a stranger to romance, even having material on how to run the game with romantic elements or relationships. Kindred the Embraced also is a social and political drama show with heavy emphasis on the interpersonal relationships of its characters. So full spoilers ahead for a show that is just about as old as I am, and for the greater World of Darkness franchise, I guess, as we dive into it. I also want to go ahead and mention that I did watch this show out of order. I watched Night Stalker before I even watched the pilot. I'm not sure why or how I did that, but somehow that's what happened. So I might have watched other episodes out of order, but I believe that that was the only one. Okay, back to it. So what is Kindred the Embraced? Taking place in San Francisco during modern nights, or the modern nights of the 1990s, the series follows Detective Frank Kohanic as he goes from hunting down Julian Luna, who he thinks is like a crime boss, into unraveling information about the World of Darkness featured in the series. Julian Luna, for instance, is not a mobster, but instead the Prince of LA.
You here to kill me, brother?
I'm the prince of the city. You have violated my laws.
Princes in Vampire the Masquerade are the upper echelon of kindred society, making and enforcing vampire law within a city or a region. The series does make a shift in its later half away from Frank in order to focus more specifically on Julian and the other kindred of the city. I do think this is honestly the best decision they could have made, since personally I didn't really like Frank's character, but also because it provides more opportunities for storytelling and to add additional dimension to its more interesting characters. Kindred the Embraced paints a gothic and moody San Francisco with a tentative balance between the city and its kindred. During the series' 8-episode run, we see Kindred the Embraced explore and explain various pieces of VTM lore, like its clans, political systems, and the concepts of the Masquerade. While I'm going to be talking about the differences I noticed in the series, please keep in mind that I am only familiar with 5th edition VTM, which didn't come out until 2015, so while some concepts may be familiar to me, I can't really speak in depth on the TV show's differences from the game at its original time of syndication. Perhaps its most obvious change from VTM to Kindred the Embraced is that vampires in the show can and do regularly go out in the sun. They explain in the series that it's possible as long as the kindred had recently drank blood.
The sun's coming up.
Oh, no. We can go out in the day after we fed. So, you never know when we're near.
But realistically, I think it's because this is a 90s television show, and it would have been difficult both to film and sell it constantly being night. The pilot episode itself actually begins with the death of a vampire, his corpse burning in the sunlight, so it is evident that they do still have a weakness to the sun, although it is definitely a weaker weakness than you would experience in the tabletop game. It also only seems to be relevant when the plot calls for it. We also see vampires drinking and eating casually without any obvious use of disciplines like the Blush of Life. Disciplines, or the various powers that vampire clans have access to, aren't named directly or explained in great detail. We also see reference to the transfer of powers through blood.
New powers, Julian!
A gift from Daedalus.
But we don't see any elements of blood bonding within the show, at least not explicitly. Kindred the Embraced keeps the explanations of the powers to a minimum, but we do see quite a few of them on display, and they're done pretty well for 1990s television. One thing I personally noticed with Kindred the Embraced was the lack of ghouls, humans who consume vampire blood, or vitae, for strength and limited power, but without becoming full vampires themselves. This is a pretty familiar concept to me, as someone that's only really played V5, but this could be another generational divide. I was convinced that Sonny, Frank's fellow detective, was going to be a ghoul, but he also ended up being a full-blown kindred. While the show does seem to dance around the idea of a ghoul, particularly with Frank and his resistances to vampire powers, they make a pretty clear definition of characters either being a vampire or a human, not really anything in between.
Now, I know you can pull strings. I mean, you probably got humans doing your bidding.
Oh, no, humans don't do our bidding. We have kindred in every walk of life, Frank.
I assume this decision might have been made because the primary use for ghouls within VTM is access to activities and protection during daylight hours, which becomes null and void if vampires can go out in the sun. But I do begin to question just how many kindred that San Francisco can support. We also don't see any other World of Darkness creatures like werewolves or what are they called? Geists? The ghosts. But I do think that mixing and matching the various groups would probably have been more expensive than just getting the rights to Vampire the Masquerade. Another key difference of the series, and I promise I'll stop pointing out differences eventually, is the exclusion of quite a few of the clans within Vampire the Masquerade. There's about 13 of them, give or take, and depending on the generation of game that you play, but we only see 5 or 6 within the 8 episodes of Kindred the Embraced. I think that makes sense, and they really do kind of keep it within the core or the fundamental groups of VTM, especially because it is taking place within a Camarilla setting. It would have been fun to see like a Tremere or a Malkavian, but we do kind of get what I would say is a Malkavian-esque character.
You'll have to forgive me if I get a little crazy. There's music in the madness.
It is interesting that they kind of harken back to those groups, tying that in with their vampirism, as well as including blood sorcery and alchemy, which we see being particularly popular among the Nosferatu. Although again, I'm not sure if Tremere or Malkavians for that matter were introduced prior to the show's production, or if they were released after the show had already come out. I know that they were in the original Bloodlines video game, but I don't know when those clans were initially introduced. Feel free to let me know. I'm not a history buff when it comes to this game. Love to find out. I just personally don't know. They play it pretty fast and loose with clans actually, and I'm not sure how I feel about all of the depictions. For example, one episode features a Banu Hakim, referred to as an Assamite within the show. They're used prominently throughout the episode, but only ever vaguely explained. It's definitely kept vague on purpose, but I would have personally liked to get a bit more information on both the specific character and also kind of how their role and their clan works in the world that's presented. Both the Ventru and the Toreador feel pretty fleshed out with elements that their clans typically represent.
What clan are you?
Toreador. We're the sexy ones. We like to entertain.
While others like the Bruja and Gangrel really kind of feel meshed together, with much of their differences feeling almost surface level. They act more like opposing gangs than divided factions with distinct powers. This felt particularly odd since the show does put so much emphasis on their historical disdain for each other, at least within San Francisco.
This is what the Bruja clan will do to all you gangrels!
And where were you? Off with your Bruja, bitch.
There's a very West Side Story or Romeo and Juliet element to them, with episode 3 even being called Romeo and Juliet and focusing on the relationship of Cash, the gangrel primogen, or the leader of the gangrels within the city, and Sasha, a newly embraced Bruja. Cash may or may not also be the sheriff of San Francisco. I don't believe they ever state that, but he definitely seems to take on kind of a sheriff role in the way that he completes tasks and upholds the laws of Julian City within the show. Nosferatu are one of, if not my favorite clan in Vampire the Masquerade, so I would be remiss not to talk about them within Kindred the Embraced. I may be a bit biased, but I do really like how they function in the show. We get an episode of the series pretty heavily focused on them, with episode 6, Bad Moon Rising, having a Nosferatu who wants their clan to take back power from Julian and regain some of their monstrousness they've kind of lost over time.
Oh my gosh! She's bald! She's bald and she's torturing people who have hair!
While we don't really see or explore the Nosferatu outside of San Francisco, it's clear that those within the city have kind of shed some of their physical ugliness and monstrousness that one might be familiar with the Nosferatu in order to kind of blend in a bit more while still hiding within the shadows and the sewers and what's familiar for anyone who knows the Nosferatu clan. Although they definitely did pull back a bit on the level of body horror that Nosferatu can convey, a lot of the hallmarks of their clan are still present. I would say Daedalus, the primogen, or leader of the Nosferatu within the city, is a standout character within the series. He really does have a lot of depth and dimension, especially compared to some of the other characters within the series.
Share a glass of wine with me.
Whatever happens, I want you to know
I've always admired you. I consider you my closest friend.
He also just has some of the coolest, like, thematic and story-related moments. Kindred the Embraced takes on an episodic structure, with each episode acting as its own mystery and crime bubble. Typically, they pick a concept or idea for the episode, explain an element of vampire society, and resolve the primary issue within the same time frame. There are overlapping story chains and relationship elements, but each episode of the show can definitely be watched and enjoyed on its own. The story's two main human characters get involved with vampire activities in basically every episode, which makes a lot of sense as they both are tied in with the Masquerade and Vampire Society, kind of both in their jobs and in their social lives. While Kindred the Embraced abstains from some of the rules of VTM, there are trademarks, such as the need for vampires to have touchstones or human connections in order to not lose their humanity, the tragedy of someone being embraced against their will, and the all-consuming hunger, both physically and emotionally, that drives vampires within the franchise. I think Kindred the Embraced also does a nice job at exploring the Camarilla, a structure of government ruling vampires in VTM. In Vampire the Masquerade, Kindred society is typically made up of the Camarilla, or Camarilla, the Anarchs, and the Sabbat. The Bruja do sort of function as an Anarch-adjacent group, but this is more a coup within the Camarilla rather than their own function of opposing power within the city. I think they definitely built a framework for the creation of an Anarch group had the show continued. The Sabbat are not mentioned, but I would say the idea is functionally played with during the episode Night Stalker and Live Hard, Die Young, and Leave a Good-Looking Corpse, in which we see vampires driven by their own desires to the extreme, to the point that they don't really care about any formal governing powers. Overall, I really enjoyed Kindred the Embraced. While it takes place in San Francisco and not LA, I do think thematically and just vibe-wise, it definitely has a similar aesthetic and tone to the original Bloodlines game. That may just be drawn from my love for the game though, so take it with a grain of salt. It's kind of a shame that there are only 8 episodes of the series. From what I've read online, the show ended prematurely due to the passing of one of its primary actors. Mark Frankel played Julian, the prince and arguably the star of the show. Frankel passed away from injuries in a traffic accident in 1996, the same year of the show's premiere. It makes sense that they would not want to continue the show, as Frankel really did create a captivating character to watch, but also ultimately takes on the main character role throughout the first season. I honestly can't imagine the show working nearly as well without his depiction of Prince Julian. Still, I would love to see more creative projects within the World of Darkness, and I'm surprised there hasn't been more attempts for any shows or movies within the Vampire the Masquerade universe. With such a plethora of lore and material available, I'm sure it's just a matter of time though. We do have Bloodlines 2 coming out sometime in the near future maybe, although I am being steadily kind of de-influenced from buying it. There are plenty of games and books and material for the World of Darkness universe that I really enjoy. While the show itself may be a bit schlocky with clunky writing,
you know, I knew we were gonna get along when you ordered your steak. Very, very rare.
Bon appetit.
and perhaps a tad confusing for those jumping in without context, I do think that there is a lot to like about the show too. The actors are clearly giving it their all, and when it works, it really works. As it stands though, Kindred the Embraced is a fun, not always perfect, supernatural drama series that I think has more good than bad. If you're interested in watching one episode that is not the pilot, I might say my favorite is Live Hard, Die Young, and Leave a Good-Looking Corpse. It's a Toreador episode, which admittedly is not my favorite clan, so I was surprised by how much I liked it. It follows an artist driven mad by his introduction into the world of darkness, and who becomes perhaps a bit drunk on power. Functionally, I think it has one of the strongest story arcs and writing of the 8 episodes, and it does a lot in regards to both the story and the characters, kind of transitioning them to where they will be throughout the remaining first season. Anyways, I guess that's all I have to say for today. Sorry for the delay with videos. I'm currently running 2 D&D campaigns. We're working and trying to learn how to code in Godot, although that will probably be done sooner than later. I forgot how much I didn't like coding until I tried to pick it up again as a hobby. Because of all that, this YouTube channel has kind of been pushed to the side. I have a few videos that I do really want to make, but they're all based on either book series or TV series, so I need to finish reading all their books or watch what remains of the episodes in order to talk about them. As always, I appreciate your patience and can only hope to have something up soon. In the meantime, let me know how your Valentine's Day was. Were you also sitting at home alone watching something on TV? Let me know what it was. Anyways, hope to see you soon and have a good night. Thanks, YouTube. Bye.